Love. Marriage. Trust. 3 words that should mean everything. But what happens when the woman who promised to love you in sickness and in health was counting down the days until your funeral before you even said, "I do"? What happens when every kiss was a lie, every smile was a mask, and every "I love you" was just another step toward your grave? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Marcus Thompson was the kind of man who believed in second chances. At 42 years old, he'd built himself from nothing into something remarkable. He owned 3 auto repair shops across Detroit, each one more successful than the last. His father had been a mechanic, and Marcus had learned to take apart an engine before he could ride a bike. But unlike his father, who died broke and exhausted, Marcus had turned wrenches into wealth. He drove a Mercedes, owned a beautiful home in a quiet suburb, and had enough money in the bank to retire comfortably if he wanted to. But Marcus wasn't the retiring type. He loved his work, loved his community, loved giving young men from the neighborhood their first real jobs. His employees called him Big Mark, not because of his size, though he was a solid 6'2", but because of his heart. He was generous with bonuses, patient with mistakes, and always willing to teach. At family barbecues, his sister Denise would joke that he was too good for his own good, that he saw the best in everyone even when he shouldn't. Marcus would just laugh and say that's how their mama raised him. But there was a loneliness in Marcus that money couldn't fix. His first marriage had ended 8 years earlier, no drama, just 2 people who'd grown apart. No kids. No bitterness. Just emptiness. He filled his days with work and his weekends with his nephews, but late at night, in that big house, the silence was heavy. Then he met Shanice. It was at a business networking event downtown, one of those mixers where small business owners exchanged cards and talked about growth strategies. Marcus almost hadn't gone. He hated those things, all the forced conversation and fake smiling. But his accountant had convinced him it would be good for business. Shanice was standing near the bar, wearing a navy blue dress that was professional but caught his eye anyway. She had smooth brown skin, her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and when she smiled at him, it felt genuine. They talked for 2 hours straight. She told him she was a freelance marketing consultant, helping small businesses build their online presence. She'd grown up in Atlanta, moved to Detroit 3 years ago for a fresh start after a bad breakup. She was 34, never married, no kids, focused on building her career. She laughed at his jokes. She listened when he talked about his shops, asked intelligent questions about his business model, seemed genuinely impressed by what he'd built. When the event ended, she gave him her card. Marcus called her 2 days later. Their first date was dinner at a soul food spot he loved, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and waitresses who called everyone baby. Shanice ordered catfish and talked about her dreams of starting her own marketing firm one day. Marcus found himself leaning in, captivated. She wasn't like the women he'd met on dating apps who only seemed interested in what he could buy them. Shanice talked about her goals, her passion for helping businesses grow, her love of old Motown records. She asked about his mother, who'd passed 5 years earlier, and when he got emotional talking about her, Shanice reached across the table and squeezed his hand. 6 months later, Marcus proposed. His sister Denise had concerns. "Don't you think you're moving kind of fast?" she asked him over coffee one Saturday morning. Marcus understood her worry. 6 months wasn't long. But when you're in your 40s and you've already had one failed marriage, you know what you want. You don't waste time. "I love her, Dee," he said simply. "She makes me happy." Denise wanted to say more. Something about Shanice felt off to her, though she couldn't put her finger on it. Maybe it was how Shanice's stories about her past were always vague, how she never seemed to have family visiting or old friends from Atlanta calling. But she saw the light in her brother's eyes and decided to keep her doubts to herself. She didn't want to be the bitter sister who couldn't let her brother be happy. The wedding was small, just close family and friends at a boutique hotel. Shanice looked stunning in an ivory gown. Marcus cried when he said his vows. "You saved me from a life of loneliness," he told her, his voice breaking. "I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you for the rest of my life." Shanice smiled, her eyes glistening with what looked like tears, and said her vows beautifully. No one knew that 3 weeks before the wedding, she'd taken out a $2 million life insurance policy on Marcus, listing herself as the sole beneficiary. Marcus had signed the papers without much thought. Shanice had explained it was just smart financial planning for married couples. "God forbid anything happens to either of us, we should be protected," she'd said. It made sense to Marcus. That's what responsible adults did. The first year of marriage was good. Great, even. Shanice moved into Marcus's house and redecorated with style. She cooked for him, his favorite meals, smothered pork chops, mac and cheese the way his mama used to make it, peach cobbler on Sundays. She'd greet him when he came home from work with a kiss and a cold beer. They'd sit on the back porch and talk about their days. She still did her marketing consulting, working from home mostly, though Marcus noticed she never seemed to have many clients. When he offered to help her get more business, maybe introduce her to people he knew, she'd wave him off. "I'm being selective about who I work with," she'd say. Quality over quantity. Marcus didn't push. If she was happy, he was happy. Besides, he made enough money for both of them. What he didn't know was that Shanice was busy with something else entirely. Someone else. A man named Terrell, who lived 2 states away in Ohio. They'd met in an online chat room 6 months before Shanice ever met Marcus. Terrell was 40, recently divorced, working construction, and desperately lonely. Shanice had told him she was single, stuck in a dead-end town, dreaming of a life with someone who really understood her. They'd talk for hours every night, the kind of intense, emotional connection that feels like love when you're isolated and vulnerable. Shanice told Terrell everything he wanted to hear. She sent him photos, not all of them appropriate. She made him feel like the most important man in the world. And slowly, carefully, she planted an idea. 14 months into the marriage, things began to change. Marcus started feeling sick. At first, it was just fatigue, which he chalked up to working too hard. Then came the stomach pains, sharp and sudden, doubling him over at random times during the day. He'd rush to the bathroom, vomiting, feeling like his insides were on fire. Shanice was concerned, or at least she seemed to be. She insisted he see a doctor. The doctor ran tests but couldn't find anything definitive. Maybe it was stress. Maybe an ulcer developing. They put him on medication and told him to take it easy. But Marcus didn't get better. He got worse. The episodes became more frequent. Some mornings he could barely get out of bed. His employees started noticing. Big Mark, who never missed a day of work, who was always the first one at the shop, was calling in sick 2-3 times a week. His sister Denise stopped by the house one afternoon and was shocked by what she saw. Marcus looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 months. His skin had a grayish tint. He'd lost weight. His eyes were sunken. "Marcus, what is going on with you?" Denise asked, barely hiding her alarm. Shanice answered before Marcus could. "The doctors can't figure it out. We've been to 3 different specialists. They think it might be something autoimmune." Denise looked at her brother, who nodded weakly from the couch. Something in her gut screamed that this wasn't right. "Maybe you need to go to a hospital in Ann Arbor or even out of state, get a specialist who really knows what they're looking at," Denise suggested. Marcus agreed to think about it. But before he could make an appointment, things escalated in a way no one saw coming. It was a Tuesday night, around 11 p.m. Marcus and Shanice were in bed. Marcus had taken his usual evening medication, the pills the doctor prescribed for his stomach, plus some vitamins Shanice had bought him from a health food store. "These will help boost your immune system, baby," she told him. He trusted her completely. Around midnight, Marcus woke up feeling strange. His heart was racing, pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. His chest felt tight. He tried to sit up but felt dizzy, like the room was spinning. "Shanice," he called out, his voice weak. She stirred next to him. "What's wrong? Something's not right. I can't breathe right. My chest." Shanice turned on the light and looked at him. For just a moment, something flickered across her face. Not concern. Something colder. But then it was gone, replaced by worry. "I'm calling 911, she said, reaching for her phone. The ambulance arrived 14 minutes later. By then, Marcus was barely conscious. The paramedics rushed him to the hospital. Shanice rode with them, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't leave me," she whispered. "Please, baby, hold on." At the hospital, they stabilized him. The ER doctor was confused by his symptoms. His blood work showed elevated levels of certain substances that didn't make sense. They admitted him for observation and more tests. Shanice stayed by his bedside, the devoted wife, bringing him anything he needed, talking to doctors, updating family. Denise came every day, watching her brother fight for his life, watching Shanice play the concerned spouse, and that feeling in her gut got stronger. On the third night of Marcus's hospital stay, Denise made a decision that would change everything. She went to Marcus's house using the spare key she'd always had. She told herself she was just going to pick up some fresh clothes for Marcus, maybe grab his phone charger. But really, she was listening to that voice inside that kept screaming something was wrong. She went into the master bedroom and started looking around. In Shanice's nightstand drawer, underneath some magazines and lotion, she found a phone. Not Shanice's iPhone, which Denise had seen her use countless times. This was an older Android, a cheap prepaid phone. Denise's hands trembled as she turned it on. The battery was low but it powered up. No password. She opened the messages and felt her blood turn to ice. There were hundreds of texts between Shanice and someone named Terrell. The recent ones made Denise's stomach turn. "Is it done yet?" Terrell had written 5 days earlier. "Almost. He's getting weaker. Won't be long now," Shanice had replied. "I'm tired of waiting. You promised we'd be together once he was gone." "Baby, I know. Just a little more patience. The insurance won't pay out if it looks suspicious. It has to look natural." Denise kept scrolling, going back weeks, months. The messages painted a horrifying picture. Shanice and Terrell had been planning Marcus's death for over a year. Shanice had been poisoning Marcus slowly with antifreeze, small amounts mixed into his drinks and food, enough to make him sick but not enough to kill him quickly. The plan was to make it look like he'd died from a mysterious illness that doctors couldn't diagnose. She'd researched it carefully. Antifreeze poisoning mimicked other conditions, made people think kidney failure, heart problems, anything but murder. Denise felt like she was going to vomit. Her brother, her sweet, trusting brother, had been dying slowly at the hands of the woman he loved. The woman he'd married. The woman who slept next to him every night. With shaking hands, Denise took photos of every message. Then she called the police. Within 2 hours, detectives were at the hospital. They collected samples from Marcus, ran specific tests for ethylene glycol, the active ingredient in antifreeze. The results came back positive. His system was full of it. They also got a warrant for the house. In the garage, they found a bottle of antifreeze that was nearly empty, even though Marcus's Mercedes used a different type of coolant. In the kitchen, they found traces of antifreeze in the blender Shanice used to make Marcus's morning smoothies. They found it in the vitamin bottles. They found her computer search history, pages and pages of research on untraceable poisons, life insurance policies, how long it takes for insurance companies to investigate suspicious deaths. Shanice was arrested at the hospital. Marcus was still unconscious when they put handcuffs on her and led her out. She didn't cry. She didn't protest. She just asked for a lawyer. The hospital staff and visitors stared in shock as police walked the devoted wife through the corridors in handcuffs. Terrell was arrested the same night in Ohio. When questioned, he broke almost immediately. He told police everything. How Shanice had convinced him that Marcus was abusive, that she was trapped, that the only way they could be together was if Marcus was gone. How she'd promised they'd split the insurance money and start a new life together. How she'd sent him photos of Marcus getting sicker and sicker, proof that her plan was working. Terrell claimed he tried to talk her out of it, but the messages told a different story. He'd encouraged her. Cheered her on. Told her to finish the job. Marcus woke up 4 days later. The doctors had been treating him for antifreeze poisoning, flushing his system, trying to reverse the damage. He was confused, disoriented. Denise was there, holding his hand, crying tears of relief and grief. "Where's Shanice?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. Denise didn't know how to tell him. How do you tell someone that the person they loved, the person they trusted most in the world, had been slowly killing them? "Marcus, there's something you need to know," she started, her voice breaking. She told him everything. At first, he didn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. Shanice loved him. She took care of him. She was worried about him. But Denise showed him the messages on her phone, the photos she'd taken of the texts between Shanice and Terrell. Marcus read them in silence, his face completely blank. When he finished, he closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "She never loved me," he whispered. It wasn't a question. It was the most painful realization of his life. Denise squeezed his hand tighter. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry." The man who'd believed in second chances, who'd seen the best in everyone, who'd opened his heart completely to someone he thought was his soulmate, had to accept that from day one, before the wedding, before the vows, before the life they'd built together, she'd been planning his murder. The trial happened 11 months later. Marcus had survived, but the damage to his kidneys and liver was permanent. He'd need medication for the rest of his life. He'd never be as strong as he was before. The prosecution had overwhelming evidence. The text messages. The search history. The physical evidence of antifreeze in the house. Terrell agreed to testify against Shanice in exchange for a reduced sentence. In court, Marcus had to sit and listen to the details of how his wife had tried to kill him. How she'd put poison in his morning coffee, in his smoothies, in the special meals she'd cooked with such care. How she'd held his hand in the hospital while hoping he'd die. How she'd researched the symptoms to make sure she was giving him just enough to kill him slowly without raising immediate suspicion. The defense tried to argue that Shanice had been manipulated by Terrell, that she was a victim too. But the evidence showed clearly that Shanice had been the mastermind. She'd researched the poison. She'd taken out the insurance policy. She'd administered the antifreeze. Terrell had been a willing participant, but this had been her plan from the beginning. When it was his turn to give a victim impact statement, Marcus stood at the podium and looked directly at Shanice for the first time since his arrest. She looked different now. The warm, loving woman he'd known was gone. In her place sat a stranger with cold eyes. "I loved you," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotion. "I gave you everything I had. My home. My money. My trust. And you gave me poison. You smiled at me every morning while planning my funeral. You said you loved me while counting down the days until I was dead. I'll never understand how someone can be that cruel. How someone can lie so completely. I want you to know that you didn't just try to kill my body. You killed my ability to trust. To love. To believe in good. That's a kind of death too. And I'll carry that for the rest of my life. Shanice showed no emotion. She didn't cry. Didn't apologize. Just stared ahead blankly. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder. Fraud. Conspiracy. The judge sentenced her to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Terrell got 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder. As they led Shanice out of the courtroom, Marcus watched her go. He felt no satisfaction. No relief. Just a deep, aching sadness for the life he'd thought he was building and the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. 2 years have passed since that day. Marcus is still rebuilding his life. Physically, he's recovered as much as he can, though he tires easily and his health will never be what it was. Emotionally, the scars run deeper. He sold the house where he'd lived with Shanice, unable to walk through those rooms without seeing her ghost. He moved into a smaller place closer to his sister. He still runs his auto shops, though he stepped back from day-to-day operations, letting his managers handle more. He goes to therapy twice a month, working through the trauma of loving someone who was actively trying to end his life. He's closer to his family now, especially Denise, who saved his life by trusting her instincts. Some nights, he still wakes up in a panic, his heart racing, remembering that feeling of his body shutting down while the woman in bed next to him slept peacefully. He wonders how many times he was close to not waking up. How many mornings he drank that poisoned coffee and went to work, not knowing. The hardest part, he tells his therapist, isn't the physical pain or even the betrayal. It's the questioning. He replays every moment of their relationship, searching for clues he missed. Were there signs? Were there moments when the mask slipped and he just didn't see it? Or was Shanice that good of an actress, that skilled at deception? His therapist reminds him that this isn't his fault. That some people are capable of sustained, calculated cruelty that's almost impossible to detect. That his kindness, his trust, his willingness to love, those aren't weaknesses. They're what make him human. Think about this for a moment. How would you feel if the person sleeping next to you every night was slowly poisoning you? If every meal prepared with love was actually preparation for your death? If every kiss was a countdown? Marcus lived that reality. He trusted completely and was betrayed in the most fundamental way possible. And here's the question we need to ask ourselves, in a world where this kind of deception is possible, how do we protect ourselves without becoming closed off and suspicious of everyone? How do we maintain our humanity, our ability to love and trust, when we know that some people are capable of such calculated evil? Marcus is trying to figure that out. Some days are better than others. He started dating again, very slowly, very cautiously. There's a woman named Angela who owns a bakery near one of his shops. She's kind, patient, understanding about his past. They've been on a few dates. Marcus wants to trust her, wants to believe that not everyone is like Shanice. But every time she offers him a drink, there's a split second of hesitation, a flash of fear. He hates that Shanice stole that from him, that ease of trust. But he's trying. That's all any of us can do. Try. Hope. Choose to believe in good even when we've experienced the worst. Marcus's story is a reminder that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a home-cooked meal. Sometimes it says, "I love you," while planning your funeral. But it's also a reminder that survival is possible. That healing, though slow and painful, can happen. That family, real love, the kind that actually protects instead of destroys, that's what saves us in the end. So let me ask you, how would you have handled this situation if you were Marcus? Would you have seen the signs, or would you have trusted just like he did? And if you were Denise, would you have followed your gut feeling even when everyone thought you were being paranoid? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear how this story made you feel and what you would have done differently. This is a real reminder that sometimes the person closest to us is the one we know the least. Stay safe out there. Protect your heart, but don't let the darkness in this world stop you from loving. And remember, if something feels off, trust your instincts. They might just save your life.